Dr. Fleming and Dr. Graham, we are live streaming.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I hope everybody is doing well today, and thank you for joining us for our November 18th Budget and Compensation Subcommittee. Dr. Graham is with us, but I know he had some prior commitments that he's having to work on as well. So I'll kick the meeting off, and then he can feel free to join us when he is able to. But I hope again everyone is doing well, and we will roll through the agenda. And let's see if we have it on the screen there. I believe we do. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today.
So moved. This is Marcy.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. Is there a second?
I'll second Monica Lambert.
Motion is made and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Motion carries. And I did fail to go over the agenda, but we will here in just a second approve the minutes from the October 28th meeting. We'll do a quick introduction, and then we will get into a continued discussion on our professional advancement accounts and the dollar amount and thoughts around that. We'll have a discussion on any hold harmless provisions and policies after that, and then we'll adjourn. So we have an action-packed agenda, and hopefully we will not have any problems getting through that, because we are continuing down the timeline of our work, and we do have a deadline we've got to hit. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a look at the October 28th meeting minutes, and I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
Jackie Ennis, so moved.
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Brian Hassel, second.
Thank you, Brian. Motion been made and seconded to approve the minutes from October 28th, 2021. All those in favor say aye.
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 All approved or all opposed, no. Motion carries. Next, again, just a little bit on our work thus far. We are, again, quickly moving down the calendar here. We are going to be working again on hold harmless provisions and professional advancement accounts. And so we are quickly getting to the end of this timeline. And I know our work is not finished yet, but we will continue to head down the timeline. Next, on salary recommendations, Kim, I'm not sure if you want me just to go over this. We have kind of met consensus on this, but
Yes.
Go ahead.
So the salary recommendations that were decided last month for learning permit was $30,000. License 1 was $38,000. License 2, $40,000, and then license 3 was $45,000. And then for license 4, it's $56,000, and license advanced teacher classroom excellence would be license 4 base salary plus 10% stipend, and then license advanced teacher adult leadership. That license had license 4 base salary plus 30% stipend. Just to give it a quick overview.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful, I think, for all of us. And I know we've had extended conversations about that, but I do want to pause just a moment. If anyone has anything to share as we continue on, again, this is not really something we need to spend a lot of time on, because we have certainly discussed it, but I'm not sure if anybody has any comments or questions around the recommendations, which again, we've kind of reached consensus on, so I think we're beyond that. But if anyone has anything to share.
Dr. Fleming?
Yes, go right ahead.
This is Tom Tomberlin.
Hey.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. So generally, when we talk about stipends from a salary perspective, those are not considered compensation for the purposes of retirement, and often may not have certain taxation requirements associated with them, but they would still have tax liability associated with them, but they're not subject to certain types of withholding sometimes. I just want to clarify with the group that we intend it to be that way, or would we want to see that salary premium, or whatever we want to call it, contributing to a person's eventual retirement benefit and or other things. And I just want to make sure, I just want to be clear about how we're situating that additional funding.
Yeah, I think that's a good, again, I would open that up for conversation either here in the group or chat. You know, as we're working through using the assessor money for bonuses, for retention bonuses here in Harnett, you know, that conversation has come up quite a bit where some of your more seasoned, I guess you could say, more veteran employees certainly want it to count towards in retirement. And then you have the younger generation that want less taken out of it, so they have more to spend. And I think that's kind of the argument here a little bit, but would love to hear everyone's comments on that. And I believe did Marcy put something here in the chat?
I did. I think that this should be considered salary. There are tons of other bonuses and what's called premium pay now and other things that are going out there. And if you were looking strictly at pay for performance and the bonuses that we pay based on test scores alone, those are certainly bonuses. But this, in my view, is actually a salary supplement. Mm-hmm. That should, in my opinion, as one person on this group, be salary for the purposes of contribution to retirement.
And this is Jeff Coltrane. I was thinking the same thing. And maybe supplement is better than stipend. I think local supplements, Tom, are counted in salary for retirement purposes, if I remember correctly. And so maybe it's 10%, 30% supplement.
Yeah. So yes, and so thank you, everyone. That was my assumption, but I wanted to make sure I checked with the group. So we'll change that language to something that would be more conducive to, clarifying that this is salary that will, that contributes to retirement. And Dr. Hassel, I see your question in here. I think when we modeled this salary, we didn't separate it out. So the cost, the tool we developed, whatever salary we put in for for advanced classroom excellence and advanced adult leadership, whatever salary amount we put in there, we're attaching the retirement contribution to that and all the benefits that would be associated with salary as opposed to a bonus. So it should be captured in that model.
That's great. Yep. And I tend to agree that when bonuses come up, they're just that, they're bonuses. And so, or premium pay that are not necessarily linked to work or labor or whatnot. And so those will come up over the years and are not subject, but this, I tend to agree, we want to be a part of the salary. Excellent. Anything further on Dr. Tomberlin's point there, or on the salary recommendations? All right. Dr. Evans, I believe we're moving on to professional advancement accounts.
This is Jeff again. This is not related to this, but I know we had the tool that I think the team at VPI put together for us to calculate different salary things. Is that tool still available? by chance? And if so, can Tom or Kim or Andy drop it in the chat maybe?
Yep, we'll dig it up for you.
Thanks.
Excellent. Dr. Evans, we moving on to professional advancement accounts now.
Yes, that's right.
Very good. So we had a conversation in the last meeting on a $5,000 professional advancement account. We're going to kind of have we're going to open the floor up. I believe when we were kind of planning the meeting, we had a discussion maybe around small groups or whatnot. But I felt like Dr. Graham and I talked about just kind of opening this up for conversation. If you recall, we all kind of a few of our counties brought together some numbers of what we're spending on PD, and we kind of had an idea of where to land and where our discussion's been for over 5 years. What would that total amount look like? And we had this idea of $5,000. Would like to open it up just to hear your thoughts on this. Is this still an appropriate number? Too high, too low? I think this, I assume, and Dr. Graham or Dr. Evans can certainly jump in here, Dr. Tomberlin, if I'm incorrect in saying this, but I think this is something that we can probably close the book on today and check off the list. That's where I'm hoping we're at. And so in terms of the professional advancement account. So I will open it up for any discussion. Again, Dr. Tomberlin or Dr. Evans, if you have anything to add to guide our discussion, please feel free to add it.
So this is Tom again. Just so we have clarity, staff has clarity as we try to kind of put these pieces together. When we're talking about the professional advancement account, we need to be really clear. What this says here is $5,000 for licenses 1 through 3 over 5 years.
Yeah.
So to me, that suggests a teacher in the license 1 through 3 phase gets access to $5,000 over that entire period. Or do we mean you get $5,000 or whatever amount when you're in license 1 to help you move to license 2? Then when you're in license 2, you get some different amount to help you move from license 2 to license 3. So as you can imagine, that's different. So we just need to really be very clear about is the PAA tied to the license level for an individual, or is it tied to the individual until such time as they reach license 4?
And so, Tom, just for clarity, so if I'm license 1 and I go to 2 all of a sudden, and I spent my full $5,000, are you asking, do we get another $5,000, or you don't get the $5,000 for 5 years? You know, if you spend it all in year 1, you move to a next level, you're not going to get another $5,000.
That's right. So the way that, I've heard both things discussed, and I think the way that I've always thought about it is, and let's leave 5,000 out of it for right now. You get X. So you get X when you're granted license 1 that is to be used towards moving to license 2. Once you hit license 2, any remaining funds from the previous allotment would revert. So it doesn't come to you, it goes back to the state, or you spend it all. Whichever happens, you get refreshed when you move into license 2, and you've got a new account with new funding to move you forward. That's the way I think I've always thought about it. I'm not saying that's the right way. I'm just saying that's the way I've thought about it. But it sounds like from the way this is constructed, when you enter license 1, you get $5,000, and you've got to use that. You use that money to advance you all the way up to license 4, and you have a 5-year clock on those funds, which is fine as well. I just want to make sure we're capturing it the correct way.
I will open it. Sorry, I was reading the chat here. I will open it up for comments to our questions to Dr. Tomlin's kind of, I will say, inquiry. And I'll apologize for any noises you hear in the background. They are redoing the road in front of us here, so it's
Dr. Fleming, Bill Griffin.
pretty loud. Yeah, go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can. You're a little low, but I can hear you.
Great. If we're offering $5,000 per level, does that take away from a person who has gone the traditional path of the EPP and enters at a license level 3? Being that we didn't help with their coursework or taking care of any of their course credits to get where they came into the system?
That's a good question. Dr. Tomlin, can you answer that?
So what I would do is, Kim, can you go back to the compensation levels? There we go. So let's think about that. So let's say it takes me 5 years to move from license 1 to license 3. License 3. And so I'm making 38 with a $5,000 stipend to move me. So I'm making 38 year 1, 2, and then maybe I'm making 40 year 3, 4, and 5. So you've got 120,000, 76,000, 196,000 in compensation over those 5 years, as opposed to I come out as a license 3 from the EPP. I've made $225,000 in compensation so let's say, so that 25,000, if you add in that 25,000 for the license 1, you're still $4,000 better off coming out as a license 3. Does everybody understand how I'm getting from A to B there? So to answer your question, I think you would not be availing yourself of that $5,000 professional advancement account if you did the traditional path and came in as a license 3, but your in-pocket compensation would be $29,000 more over that 5-year period than somebody who came in as a license 1. And that's the way you've set up the compensation structure. So if you want to further incentivize that, I would say, think about the license 3, the relative position of license 3, and do we want to make it more attractive for somebody to go on the front end? To do the work, to do the traditional path. But I do think there's a significant incentive for somebody to do this all up front. Remember, you're not getting that $5,000 in your pocket. It is defraying the cost of your professional advancement money. So it's keeping that person, let's assume it's keeping that person at the $38,000 and not forcing them to spend out of pocket. But still, that salary differential between a license 1 and 2 over a license 3 results in a pretty substantial incentives. I think that was Dr. Griffin. Does that help?
Yes, Tom, I appreciate that. And ultimately, I was just kind of right. Those out-of-pocket expenses, it just almost appears as though a person going the traditional pathway and trainings is not really being compensated back for their coursework, whereas a person that comes in out of field and license 1 is being compensated as they also earn a salary to to earn that degree. But, I guess it depends on if we're trying to entice people out of the educational field and the traditional pathway, get into education. If that's our intent, I think that this does what they there.
Yeah, I think the challenge that I think it's a good question. I think the challenge for us is we would be hard pressed to make a case for essentially subsidizing the education of somebody before employment. I think that's kind of out of scope for us, but it's a great recommendation to make. But that would, I really think it would be difficult for us to try to build that into a compensation model when they're not technically employed and we've got no guarantee that they would become employed. But I think that's a great topic of conversation if folks want to try to address that. I think ultimately we do want to incentivize teachers moving through the traditional preparation route and coming out prepared to be at a level license 3. I think that's, from what I've heard in these conversations, that's the overriding goal of this structure, or this initial phase anyway.
I think that's important for us is, it's having a person that's gone through a program and having understanding and knowledge and being compensated for that. And it just looks as though if we're offering $5,000 per year at each of those levels, that a person going a non-traditional route is they're being rewarded as earning compensation for their job. Then we're also compensating them for the coursework. So again, I think it's just the intent. I think they're both good models. I just don't want to penalize one or the other.
That's good. Good point. Anything further? All right. And we'll anything going on the $5,000. I think those were good questions we had. What I would like to ask again of the group, if we can, in the discussion here, and I think some of the comments were made were really good on the $5,000 for each of the years. But is $5,000 appropriate? Any comments on that? Again, too much, too little?
This is Dan Swartz. I apologize if this is an ignorant question. I jumped on late, and so I didn't know if there was some explanation on where the $5,000 came from. If we are estimating that's what they need, or have we looked at how much is needed to kind of progress them from a license 1 to a fully licensed teacher? Has there been any sort of analysis on that?
I know we compared from some of our districts in a per year basis for professional development, but Tom, would you like to tackle that one?
Yeah, so I think in the Human Capital Roundtable, we kind of did a survey of program costs across our EPPs, both public and private. This is not designed to totally reimburse a candidate for all their educational expenses, but this is, we tried to create an amount that would significantly defray that cost to the applicant. So I think 5,000 was we kind of looked at the costs. If you decide to go to X private EPP, that cost may be much higher. If you go to certain public entities, that cost, or a non-IHE affiliated program, that cost could be lower. So, and I want to be very clear that it may not even be that a candidate chooses not to use that for the costs of traditional, education in an IHE, a program completion in an IHE-based EPP, because that person may be able to avail themselves of financial aid. Really, we're saying that any activity that supports that, and it could be much broader than enrollment in an EPP, would be supported by these funds. And I have no way of knowing. None of us have any way of knowing. Once we get to a place of implementing this, what kind of different opportunities would open up for a person to be able to use these funds? I mean, I'm thinking about, if you're thinking about this from a micro-credential perspective, there may be, some kind of coaching opportunity, the person may spend some of these funds on coaching opportunities, or, a test taking something. So there's no way for us to know kind of, with a surety that, $5,000 will cover 60, 70, or whatever percentage of what an applicant might spend towards moving from license 1 to license 2. But we just kind of used EPP costs and kind of try to shoot in the middle of that for estimating this amount. But you guys are free to consider that number. I mean, I don't want the impression to be that you've got to stick with that number. I would say if you're going to start moving it, you would want to use that compensation tool. I do think we have did we include, Kim, do you know offhand if we included the stipend? Oh, yes, it is over on the right-hand side. There's the opportunity to set the stipend for licenses 1 through 3. And you can see what that should have impact on the overall budget.
This is Jeff, and I had to step off for a call, so I missed the last little bit of the conversation. So just stop me if I'm jumping into something late. So, I know the roundtable, I think it talked about the couple different ideas. For me, the potential for $15,000, why I think would be great for new teachers. It seems like a large amount for this sort of professional advancement, knowing that the district also has resources, and in the ideal scenario, there's going to be a mentor, advanced teacher there supporting the teacher as well. The $5,000 over the time period seems to match with, at least estimated cost for completing licensure only courses if you've already got a bachelor. So I think that's how we arrived, and maybe you already showed this at that $5,000. But I think the idea of thinking about maybe a different number that would be set instead of $5,000 for each license level, could make sense if $5,000 seems too low. But to me, the potential for 15 just seems really large. So.
This is Marcy, and I agree. I think that 5 a year would be too much. If 5 is too low, maybe consider 2 a year, and it doesn't carry over. So they could have a maximum of 6. I'm also a little concerned. We've been running some numbers in-house. Our alternative pathway teachers this year in particular, the numbers have skyrocketed, higher than I've seen since I first went to a school system back in the early 2000s for alternative entry. We've surpassed 4 times already here in October the total number that we hired last year. So that would be these individuals many of them who are in a license 1, 2, or 3. So that has potential financial impacts to the state and what would be available there. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces that go with this. And there's always the option to offer more later if we find out that it's necessary and available, but it's harder to pull it back if you put too high of a number up there and you're not able to sustain it. So my recommendation would be that we not exceed the either 5 over 3 years, or wanted to look at maybe even 2 a year that they couldn't roll over. Most people who go the EPP routes now, alternative licensure, can also avail themselves of financial assistance, financial aid, because they're enrolled, and even student loans. When they had alternative entry licenses and we were going through the RALC and they were only taking a course here or there at a college or university, it was an option where they really couldn't. But they do have the option to do that now more so, because they're fully enrolled in a program. So there's that for these folks too.
And I would maybe as an alternate way of arriving at this, we have a conversation around the idea of having a maximum within the time to obtain your license. And so I know 2 a year was mentioned, which could potentially, I can give you $6,000 to use. Any other proposals along those lines? If you just had a maximum, what I'll call a lifetime max, what would that number be? So when you hit it, you were no longer able to receive any additional funds. Or could you, if we said $6,000, could you, in theory, use all of that? Are you going to be limited per year, or could you use the $6,002 and then you're out of pocket for whatever time remains?
This is Dan. I would prefer that they not have the opportunity to use all in the first year and then be in a financial predicament where they can't continue and thus leave the profession in year 2 or 3. So I like the idea of unlocking, I think was the terminology that was said, additional funds as you progress. I was asking around what's the right amount? Is $5,000 the right amount? Because I want to make sure that if people are interested in the profession, that there is not a financial barrier to people sort of progressing through to becoming a continuous licensed teacher. So I do think that there has to be some skin in the game for that person. We don't want to fund it all, but at the same time, I don't want to create a situation where it's an disadvantage or an economic disadvantage for some to enter the profession. So I think maybe we could continue to look at what's the right amount.
This is Jeff again. I think the idea of unlocking and sort of building over time makes sense, so that there's always money there to help you take the next step. But instead of years, maybe it is tied to the licensure level. So you're showing progress in your skills by advancing in licenses, and then that unlocks the next, amount of money for you to access. So you could do, 2,000 per license level, or even 2,500 would make it 7,500 total. And so obviously someone who starts at license 1 who's going to need more support could get up to 7,500. Somebody starts at license 3 who's going to need less support, ideally is only going to have access to 2,500, but it sort of stages it that way, versus by year, it's more by what level of license you're at.
Dr. Fleming, this is Tom Tomberlin again.
Absolutely.
Can I comment on something I'm seeing in the chat? So this idea of the professional advancement account disincentivizing enrollment in an EPP. So I want to be clear that in both cases, so in the case of our traditional preparation program, that is embedded in the undergraduate experience. So at the end of that program, you're coming out with a baccalaureate degree and presumably a recommendation for educator licensure in the state of North Carolina. If you go the non-traditional route, you are still doing an undergraduate degree. So the idea that this is in some way disincentivizing someone, I'm curious about, because in both cases, the employee has paid for an undergraduate degree. One of those undergraduate degrees allows them to advance further in this model than the other. But the only difference in cost is the difference in the choice of which institution the person decided to attend, which we would not want to subsidize in any way, I don't think. Like, we wouldn't say, oh, if you go to a public institution, you're going to get more money than if you go to a private institution, or vice versa. So I'm not clear on the kind of detriment to the pathway, because in both cases, these folks have undertaken an undergraduate degree. Does that make sense? Or am I missing something?
I wonder if there is a concern that if I'm trying to think. But Tom, you're right. An individual paid for that undergraduate degree if they went into private industry or into education. So you're, at the end of that bachelor's degree. Some of the point I saw made on here, well, would it tell someone, well, I'll go ahead and get, I guess, a bachelor's degree in something else, and then can get the education courses paid for at a later time. I guess I could see that, but I would think if you were in the if you're going a traditional 4-year route and wanted to go into education, that wouldn't matter at that point because you were ready to get into education. That the professional advancement account is simply to help them change careers and go into education and help absorb those costs for the coursework that's required.
Yeah, and I think the incentive we're offering to the traditional program is, hey, during this time, during this preliminary stage to moving to a license 4, you are going to make substantially more money than the person who chose that other route. And to me, that's the incentive. Like, and it offers choice to the candidate. Like, when you're planning this out, do I want to do this work up front, and enter the profession ahead of the game and earn a higher salary, or do I want to go ahead and get just a what I would consider a straight bachelor's degree in a content area, and then have that training subsidized, but I'm sacrificing my take-home pay in order to have that opportunity. To me, it seems like it's offering flexibility and a choice to the person who's considering entering the profession, rather than I think it's a nice balance between choice and kind of forcing someone into a certain pathway. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I might be missing the, if folks could speak to this, I might be missing the disincentive or the incentive to doing a traditional preparation pathway here. Am I not seeing the downside, I guess is what I'm asking of those folks who.
Tom, I'll speak. This is Bill. While I address that, yes, I understand where you're coming from. That certainly does make sense. And there are incentives for that person who, I guess, chose another pathway and went into another profession, and now we're trying to get him into the world of education. As we incentivize them for those first couple of years, whereas the person who's in that traditional EPP path comes in at level 3, didn't get in, their trainings in education taken care of. That was kind of the world, but you're correct. They're both paying for a bachelor's degree in their field. It's just that one chose to be trained in the world of education as they were in that university level courses, the other, went a different route. That certainly makes sense what you're bringing up. Thank you.
So I want to be clear there. I'm not trying to win the argument. I'm just trying to make sure I understand if there's inherent problems with the way we're constructing this that I'm missing. So I appreciate that, Bill.
This is Jeff. I would agree. I think if the salary schedule works out like we've planned, then the real incentive is if you go through a traditional preparation program, you are highly likely to come out making, $7,000 more than your peers who come in without that. And so I think that I feel like is the incentive. Obviously, getting your training subsidized is helpful, but I think the salary piece seems to be I would think would be the real incentive.
Mm-hmm. So I think we're to a point of deciding again on the $5,000 over 5 years or an alternate amount over the lifetime of them moving up from license 1 to 3. I'm wording that correctly.
Hey, Aaron, this is Graham. I had to step out so I could jump in here. I'm the one who wrote that comment in the chat here, and I wanted to contextualize it. I didn't do a good job saying what I was trying to do as I was chatting. If that amount is set at $5,000 per year, my concern would be our students are very entrepreneurial in their thinking. So if I'm on loans as an undergraduate and I can see a way for me to major in something other than education at the undergraduate level, and then I can come in on the back end, subsidize the certification process, thus I'm kind of bypassing the undergraduate traditional preparation pathway to come through a back way, if you will, still going through a program. But from the university's perspective, depending on how you're classifying the person, it could impact your budgetary model. The way for a state-supported institution, it could impact the way that the money flows to the university, how we're classifying the student, undergraduate traditional, or is the person coming through as a graduate, something other. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not that it would necessarily disincentivize going through a teacher preparation program per se, but the amount of the professional development account could potentially have someone think, let me try this other approach as opposed to going through it as a traditional preparation pathway. What I didn't consider, Tom, and I thank you for bringing this up, I wasn't thinking about the new salary schedule so that the $45,000 or whatever the amount would be at that level, if I come through a traditional pathway, would be greater than what it would be at present. So that might serve as something that would be a deterrent to someone thinking, let me do something else as an undergrad through my 4-year degree pathway, and then I'll come back and try to subsidize the educational process to get my certification after I've earned my bachelor's in another discipline. So I appreciate the clarification.
And I want to say too, I see where Dr. Graham's headed with this a little bit. Other than the time commitment, because I would not want to go through 4 years and then have to go and take more courses, even though they allow me to become a teacher. I'm not getting a master's degree with those courses or anything else. I think of it I assume, I'll just use this as an example. Dr. Graham, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if a student wanted to go through and get a bachelor's degree in engineering and did that and then decided, okay, I want to teach, so they're kind of prepared again for industry, go get a job wherever. But then they think, hey, I know I can also go into education and then take advantage of the subsidized courses to get a teaching certification.
Correct. Exactly.
And I could see that again, the time commitment there for taking the education courses again and not applying that. You still have a bachelor's at the end of the day, but there are probably kids out there that were not like me.
But I want to be clear, I'm not arguing against the account. I think the account is a great idea. I think the amount that we set for the account is going to be, in my mind, for some people, what will be key. If it's $5,000 per year, that $15,000 amount, that's a nice chunk of change. So I can see people taking advantage of that to some extent to subsidize their, certification process on the back end. So I think what Jeff talked about earlier, using somewhat of a graduated scale, that I guess would go in reverse. If you're in level 1, we provide you with a little bit more because it's going to probably require more of you to get to level 2 and to level 3. But if you're entering level 3, we don't provide you as much because it won't require as much financially to go from 3 to 4. So I think that type of an approach makes perfect sense in my mind.
So it sounds to me that most everyone, I don't want to assume the vote before we take one, I guess you could say, but it sounds to me that we are open to the idea of the advancement account. We're just trying to now figure out the amount and what that amount is over time, or if it's going to be a certain percentage of that amount or a certain dollar amount of within that total each year. And that may be where we need to steer our conversation, is in determining the total amount and what percentage or what dollar amount per year would be allocated. And then Megan had entered in here that maybe limiting that or putting a limit on it could incentivize someone for maybe going above and beyond, it sounds like she's saying here. Tom, not a lot of discussion on it, but I'm still good with the $5,000. And I had not heard, I believe someone did mention the $2,000 a year and up to $6,000, something along those lines. So I'm a little stuck on if we stick with the $5,000 over the 5 years or $5,000 per license level, or if we look at a different amount.
So one thing I do want to say about this is, so the length of time that one can spend in license 1, 2, or 3 is technically, this is going to sound mean, but I don't mean it that way, is not under the purview of this group. That is advancement and development. So to put some kind of time limit of over 5 years, I think gets us in a situation where we're kind of overreaching what we can do. I think my recommendation to this group is whatever the amount is, I don't care what it is, to tie it to the license level. And that way somebody else is going to, that group that's doing this is going to be able to set the term of that license. I don't know at this point, how long you have to move from a license 1 to a license 2 or to a 2 to a 3. I don't think anybody's thinking about this from the perspective of the current system where you've got 3 years to move from an IPL to a CPL. I think very much that folks are thinking about this as maybe a little longer time frame, but with dedicated benchmarks of, here's what you have to do to move up, and this is what you get for moving up, with built-in incentives to move along that route. So I mean, you can take it for what it's worth, but my recommendation is just eliminate that over 5 years and stay away from time bounding this in any way, and tie it to the thing that that you've got some control over, you got some knowledge of, and that is the license level.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Megan's point is right. If somebody comes in as their first year as a license 1 and has, let's say, $5,000 towards professional advancement, and they can use that money, all that money, to get what they need to move to a license 2 in the next year, do we want to disincentivize that behavior? And I would think no, because if they're more skillful, which is how we're building this model, that's better for kids, and we want that to happen.
This is Bill. I would agree. We don't need to reward someone for spending more time in that program. So I think the license level or pay per level is probably better wording.
Then would we look at reducing the 5,000 down, knowing, or do we keep the 5,000 knowing it would be 15,000? And Megan has put an alternate suggestion in the group there as well, in the chat group. Dr. Tomlin, any thoughts on Megan's model proposal there?
Hang on just a second. Tom had to step away.
Oh, okay. And Megan, your point you put there at the your second point you made, or second comment there, that's kind of what's been one of my concerns, probably not as much about the money, but on the approval process or the auditing process to make sure this money is used in an appropriate way, that you didn't just, find something online, register for it, and then, not knowing the quality, or it's not being reviewed by DPI or the LEA. So I'm good for autonomy, but I am a little concerned because I sometimes can see teachers even here in this district that may bring something up that you can tell probably has not been vetted and is not real quality, just something they want to do or something they need to get CEUs, and a principal approves it, and sometimes we go back and look at it and go, wonder if this was really high quality.
Dr. Fleming, this is Tom. I'm back. I'm sorry I missed the question.
Yeah. Well, no, Megan had put a proposal up on the chat here, and was just curious on your feedback on that. And then I was just mentioning about the quality of some PD may not be worthy, I guess you could say, of this money.
Yeah, so Megan's using that consumer report, which is kind of what really makes me excited about having this professional advancement account, tied to the individual, because what I would want to do, and what I think would be in the interest of the state, is to kind of track that money and how it's being spent, and the efficacy of these different offerings in moving teachers forward, with the idea that even after an initial authorization, I agree with you. Somebody would need some way we would need to authorize the use of the funds, and that's not clear to me right now what that would be. That would require a lot of additional work that I think may be beyond our scope. But the idea here is that if you're tracking that funding and and it's tied to the individual, then you can start getting some really good data on what works and what helps teachers advance and demonstrate these competencies and skills that we're looking for, and what seems to be, a waste of time and effort, and get those things out of the system and really move people towards, high leverage and effective professional development that moves people forward, which I think, right now, professional development dollars aren't tracked in any meaningful way. We don't have any really good data on what helps teachers. And I think this is just another aspect of this model that would be appealing to the General Assembly, is that, if we could make sure that that money is, that we can report out some kind of return on investment on those funds, that would help with the, with any sticker shock that may be experienced from our model.
Agreed. So again, I will and Jackie, I believe that for a TA, for example, would use this account the same way. That would be a part of the incentive. I know many of them, and you put this on here, I didn't read, but I know many of them do not have a bachelor's degree.
So, to that point, we do the model, or the calculator, does not contemplate the apprentice role and professional advancement funding that would potentially go towards that. We do have a program in the state, TA to teacher program, that does cover tuition for those folks. It's very limited. I don't even know how we would begin to model that, because I don't have any sense of, just opening up an apprentice pathway and indicating to teachers, to folks out there who have completed an associate's degree or maybe have a couple years of college under their belt and maybe stopped college. What would this do? What kind of numbers would this bring into the system? So I don't know of a good way to model that in the cost estimates, but and
I think too, Tom, sorry to interrupt you. Here we have an extremely good partnership with Campbell University, and I will say this, and I'm not trying to. I'm certainly not speaking for public or private universities or saying that they could afford this or not. But I will tell you that with Campbell, the cost that they are charging and it's only for teacher assistants. We're not a part of the teacher to TA program, grant program. The legislature has funded. This is kind of a homegrown thing here, but the tuition is, absolutely minimal. They still have to pay it out of pocket. They can get loans for it. But it kind of goes back to the conversation we were having that everybody had to pay for that initial bachelor's degree. What these teacher assistants here in Harnett are getting is way below the standard rate, I guess you could say, per credit hour for working on their bachelor's degree. And again, I'm not, for those of you in higher ed, I'm not throwing it on you and saying you've got to find a way to make this work. But I'm sure if Campbell's able to do that, there are others that could find ways to make this affordable, to at least get to the bachelor's level, to where we then can put them on a path, I guess you could say, to using their advancement account through the license levels. And that's more about what we're doing here. And again, I don't know that would apply to everybody, but I'm very impressed with what Campbell's doing here.
This is Dan. In License 3, these are EPP teachers, is correct? So how are we thinking about them with this professional advancement account? Is everything pushing towards, we want to support them as much as possible to get to a level 4?
Tom, any response on that?
So, Brian, I'm sorry. The question is, are we offering professional advancement count to license 3 individuals to move them to the license 4 level?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes. I think, and I think this goes back to the idea I think somebody raised of, so do we have kind of a graduated system of professional advancement account? Presumably, the license 3 person has the requisite competencies at the level to achieve that. So you're not engaging in, coursework or, whatever to demonstrate the competencies anymore. You're trying to show the impact. So what does that look like? Does that, is that a coach that can give you feedback and help you refine and and better apply those skills. And that may be, you're right, that may be a mentor, a paid mentor. So I guess the point I'm getting at is that may be a lower cost to the candidate than the person in license 1 who may need to enroll in college courses. I would say we could pretty much presume that a person who's reached license 3 would not be having to take college courses to make that jump from I've got the skill set to I'm applying this, to the betterment of student learning. And so that could be an argument for kind of a waning professional advancement account as you move up in the license levels, that professional advancement count kind of declines a little bit. But from my perspective as well, when I'm thinking about this, if you're a license 3 person trying to move to a license 4, and that's all driven by showing impact on your students, that whatever professional learning that you're doing is pretty much is going to need to be job embedded. Like it's going to be have to happen in the classroom in order for it to have the intended effect. It can't be academic, or it can't be just purely knowledge based. It's performance based. So I don't know. Does that help answer the question?
It does for me. I was thinking about this progression, but really this license 3, those who would be going through an EPP are really only going to have access to this account for 1 year. So as we talk about this sort of progression and unlocking, that wouldn't necessarily apply to someone coming out of an EPP, although they would have funds for 1 year. So that's what I was trying to get straight in my head.
Right. Or technically for one transition.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I don't want to use the years. I like the idea of transitions too. So yeah. So if we do a progression, then I do think we have to name the amount that someone who comes through an approved EPP already in license 3 gets access to, whether that's $2,000 or $3,000. If we're going to provide flexibility for someone coming through license 1, license 2, and then license 3, I still think we have to name it for that different route, the EPP route. That's kind of, I was trying to parse that in my head as we were talking about that, but I think we do have to name that for them, right?
I mean, I'm gonna stipulate your kind of declining amount and say the answer to that question is yes. You'd have to be very clear that, license 1 for PAA is X, license 2 is X minus 20%, and license 3 is X minus 40%, or something like that. I do have to say that it strikes me as a little odd that when we're talking about moving from, so basically what we're talking about is moving from demonstrated competency to impact on our students, that we would invest less money in supporting that movement than we would. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not saying we're wrong about it. I'm just saying, what are the optics of that? Like, so I'm going I'm going to put $5,000, invest $5,000 in you to get this learning or this skill or this competency, and then I'm going to invest more in you to deepen that level of skill and competency. But when it comes to the idea of applying that for the for the improved learning of our students, I'm going to invest a little less in that.
Tom, this is Jeff. I think that's a good point, but I sort of think of it as the inverse, that somebody who is at license 3 has already demonstrated the skills to be successful, and so they just need a little bit more to get over that, or maybe even just time to get to that license 4, because somebody licensed, a student who graduates from an EPP comes in as license 3 and has 3 years of growth would move to license 4 automatically after 3 years. So they ideally they would be able to move faster, I think, with less support than someone who's in license 1 or 2. But I don't disagree that the optic of that seems awkward. So
yeah, but then that's good, Jeff. I appreciate that, because that's just a communication strategy, not a flaw in the system, I think.
Yeah, my thought would be is that if we're thinking about it, it's sort of tiered, that maybe it's the same amount of money for each license level. It's just wherever you come into the system, that's how much you can access. And maybe you're allowed to roll it forward. So somebody who comes in at license 1 is going to get X amount of money, while they're working their way through license 1, 2, and 3. And that if it's $2,000 in license 1 and then another $2,000 in 2 and another $2,000 in 3, then once they move up, they unlock the ability to access that money, but they don't lose any money they didn't spend before, so that at least you're guaranteeing that they're going to get access to that full amount. But then that also makes it where, if you come in at 2 or come in at 3, then, the state's investment in your skills is less, because you've already, developed those skills in your training program previously or something.
Not sure we're getting too far down the road here, but any further conversation, discussion, questions, comments?
Dr. Fleming, if I could offer a suggestion. So let's just try to break this out into smaller decision points that the group can kind of vote on and move forward on. So, I think kind of a fundamental one that I've heard here is the professional advancement account linked to the license level, and is renewed at each transition from license 1 all the way up to a license 4, or is it a flat amount that's used to move a teacher from wherever they enter the system to license 4? That's a helpful decision for us to make as a group.
I think if we break this down, that's a good point to go. What I'll do is pause, and we can quickly, because we've got 30-40 minutes, I believe, left, and we still have to talk about hold harmless, but let's talk about that. Do we want to link this to the license level or a flat amount to get the individual finished to level 4? I think someone was about to speak. I may have cut him off.
I would vote for license level.
So it'd be a set dollar amount per license level. Still keeping in the rules, I assume, that if you don't use, in this example, $5,000 or whatever it may be, it doesn't move forward with you. If you use 2,000 and you get to level 2, then you start with a new 5,000, but 3,000 does not carry forward.
I mean, I would say it should carry forward if we decide, but that's just my thinking. Because
so you would want that it would be 8,000 then in theory.
Correct. So yeah, so they would. So essentially, wherever you come in, you're going to be guaranteed a certain amount of money. Right. Well, I guess you could jump from a license 1 to a license 3, or a license 1 to license 4. But there's a certain amount of money you could access, but it increases, or the amount that's available.
You're getting as you right. So you're getting in that. You would be getting in this example again, the $5,000. If you only needed that 3 times, you would at least be guaranteed 15, and you would not lose the 15 as you moved up. Well, then let's go to a vote on this. We hadn't had a lot of conversation necessarily on this particular piece, but let me ask you this: if and I think that would be good. I would put in the chat: would you like it linked to the license level, or would you like it to be a flat amount given from the beginning to move you all the way through to license 4? And I almost did a voice vote on that, but that would not have been smart. Okay. I think I can see where the majority is headed here. So we will link that to license level. Dr. Tom, I assume the next piece would be determining that amount for each license level, or the amount.
That sounds like a plan to me.
Yeah, well, and I was trying to think of how to say this without the same amount per license level, but I know that could also be up for discussion. But in the example we gave for the 5,000, that would have been for each level, and it didn't change. License 1 would get 5, license 2 5, so on, so forth. If everyone would enter in your chat the amount you believe would be appropriate for to pay for each license level. Again, making the assumption it's the same amount for each license level. Okay, so we've got a 2,000, 2,500, 4,000. 2,000, 2,500, 4,000. Any others? Seeing some more 2,500s. So I've, again, the numbers have not changed, but there's different numbers coming in. So if it was 2,000, coming in at a license 1, that would be a potential maximum of 6. 2,500 would be 7,500. 4,000, I think I saw, which would be 12,000. Hopefully my math is correct in all those. Let's settle on those 3 since for discussion, and since that is what has been, since those are the ones thrown out there. So I will open it up on any discussion, and then we'll go for a vote after that. If anyone would like to defend their amount.
This is Dan Swartz. I threw out 4,000. I'm flexible, but that was coming off of, I think, the Human Capital Roundtable. I think the research that they had done, I think Tom said that would be not all of the cost, but some of the cost, maybe around 50 to 60%, if I remember correctly. So I just wanted to have a number that was realistic, but at the same time, didn't create a financial burden for people kind of transitioning, having to take additional coursework, paying out of pocket to become an educator. So that's why I said 4,000, but very flexible with it.
Okay. All right, so what I'm typing here into the chat, please vote for amount, so that way I know where to start the count here. Please vote if you would like each license level to be $2,000, $2,500, or $4,000. Keeping in mind that the maximum then would be $6,000, $7,500, and $12,000. And I will try to count as this scrolls. All right, final call if you would like to vote. Or if you are not able to type for one reason or another, if you just want to open up your mic and let me know if you have not already typed it in. I'm going to go back through and audit my tally here, and we'll see, make sure I'm
Dr. Fleming.
Yes.
I just want to see if folks with this conversation are using the compensation calculator to see the impact of this, and if not, so that model estimates about 20% of our teaching force would be eligible for a stipend or a professional advancement account, and I think that number is pretty spot on. And at 2,500, that has an impact of 45 million to the overall impact of the financial model. And I'm just giving you numbers. I'm trying not to be, trying not to lead anybody down. 4,000 puts you at 72 million, and 5,000, which would put you at 90 million. So just wanted to give people a sense of the financial impact of those different salary PAA ranges.
Yeah, and thank you. I just, after Monica being the last one here to vote, I show 1 for 2,000, 7 for 2,500, and 6 for 4,000. So $2,500 per license level, which is half of the originally stated amount, but which would be a maximum of 7,500 over your 3. I'll say 3 years, but over your 3 license levels as you progress forward would be the winner. And again, I will pause for any discussion on that or I'd say change on vote. But if anyone has heartburn or just really has anything compelling to share. And I did not vote, by the way, so. All right, I'm not hearing anything, so we'll settle with the 2,500 each license level. It'd be a $7,500 max. And again, I don't remember now, Dr. Tomlin, I was counting, but what the fiscal impact of that would be. All right. At this time, our next task would be to have a discussion on the hold harmless provisions. As it is shown here on the slide deck, thoughts on the amount for hold harmless, the duration, how long would you be held harmless for, through the renewal period, a certain number of years, forever, whatever it may be. Integrating out-of-state teachers, articulate the hold harmless policy sent to DPI's finance folks for feedback, and non-teaching work experience, and does this need to be recognized? And so, Tom, I'm going to throw it back over to you for any clarifying thoughts on these 4 bullet points here. Oh, we made a lot. Did we lose Tom again?
I think I'm here now. I couldn't unmute for a while, which is probably best for everyone involved. But to answer
we can't do it without you.
To answer your earlier question, 2,500 will will mean a $45 million investment in professional advancement accounts. So I don't think that still keeps us at around 1.3 billion for the entire compensation model. Right. And then, did you have a second question?
Well, my second question was just I went over these bullet points on the whole group discussion for hold harmless, and just basically read off the slide. But I just wanted to know if there's anything there to clarify, other areas we need to look at. Or if you wanted to give examples on duration for hold harmless, to for it to how long it would last and all, or could it last forever? That was one of the things that I had a question about. Was with hold harmless, in my mind, it kind of is there forever until you get on the scale, so to speak.
Right.
And if that would be would that be out of the question to be able to do that? Do state raises, this is one of the things we're kind of struggling with here right now, which is more with classified than certified, but with state raises, would you still get that money in addition to your hold harmless amount, or would that just then again apply to trying to get you back onto the scale, if that makes sense? I think there's just a lot of variables here that I could think of reasons for hold harmless.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think at best, as far as that question you asked about state raises, so, the way this has been discussed in the Human Capital Roundtable, people are at their license level, and that doesn't have any kind of a gradated step where you move up incrementally the number of years you're in that. What's been recommended is that we indicate to the legislature that those, salary increases would be, what we would call COLA, or cost of living adjustments, would be under the purview as it is now, under the purview of the General Assembly. And when those are approved, they apply to everybody in that license category. So that's how people would not stagnate, is that the General Assembly is really kind of responsible for creating those cost of living adjustments every year, every biennium, whatever that schedule looks like. But this is not a step and lane model at all. And so, I would assume that if you're on the hold harmless and that kind of across the board increase was provided, that would apply to the hold harmless folks as well. As to the question of, can somebody exist there in perpetuity? I don't know. I mean, I think that's a decision, but I think we need to be very clear about what that means. Does that mean they continue in a step and lane salary schedule, or are they held harmless of where they came in? Mm-hmm. Because then you're creating a really interesting problem. Like, if these teachers are able to advance just by being there another year, what does that do to the overall model of, but I'm requiring these other teachers to demonstrate additional competence, skill, and impact in order to move through the model? I think that's highly problematic. Or are they frozen at their hold harmless state and only get any incremental cost of living adjustments as the General Assembly issues those?
And that makes sense, because we ultimately want people to get off of the step system. So if you hold them there forever, they never will.
So, Dr. Fleming, this is Marcy. And this is a great discussion, and this is what a lot of us are dealing with right now with teachers and even some administrators who are still off scale from when the teacher salary schedules were revised 5 years ago, because they were at such an advanced stage in their steps and their degrees. And that off-scale provision has continued to, what we call a TOS, we mark it for top of scale. It's just clearer for us that way. But it continues to decrease over time as the other scale and the incremental increases start to catch up. And so the two start to meet. That's kind of my vision of what a hold harmless would be. To Tom's point, it would be frozen where they were when they came in until such time they catch up with the scale, or get on the scale, And then all bets are off from that point. If they ever, like if they were to go to one of these higher levels and then for some reason go back to a different level, that would mean less. Once they've ever come off of hold harmless, they wouldn't go back to that.
Right.
At least that's my kind of in how it would work in my head. And I guess, again, also to Tom's point, yes, any cost of living or incremental increases, we still have to implement those with people from the old scale that have what we again here call a TOS. We still have to pay them that. But eventually, again, the figures start to catch up and align to one another. And as someone retires or separates, then hold harmless doesn't apply to them any longer, or they change positions. They go to an administrator role, and then go back to a teaching position. They don't go back to a hold harmless salary. So that's kind of nuances we have to work out as well once we actually define what we mean by hold harmless here.
Tom, let's talk a second about out-of-state teachers. I believe, and Marcy can correct me if I'm wrong, but now is, and I assume again this is kind of the idea of matching pay or whatever it may be, but now you kind of just come in and you if you're out of state, outside of the licensure piece, when it comes to pay, you're going to make, state salary schedule plus local supplement. I don't know what other way would we look at out of state teachers, Tom? Is there something I'm missing there? And I probably am, but.
So, I mean, my concern here is that, I think it depends ultimately on what kinds of measures are developed. If the licensure subcommittee decides that, a licensure exam in, passing a licensure exam in content and pedagogy qualifies you for a license 3, let's say. I'm just making this up. I don't have any idea. Then it would be very easy for us to situate, because most people that are coming to us from out of state have passed some kind of licensure exam as part of their licensing. So it would be fairly easy for us to situate them in the model. The question becomes that, if that's a license 3, then that will trigger kind of it's likely to trigger a hold harmless for somebody that may be coming to us with 20 years of experience. Like, right. Presumably they would have made more than that on the state salary schedule. I think your guys are a little hamstrung in this because you don't know if the measures are going to be comparable, and let's just assume that they're probably not. So what would we do to get this person to a comparable salary that they're willing to come to the state of North Carolina for? I guess is the ultimate question. And there, I think you kind of hold the last. I mean, it is a hold harmless situation. You hold the last approved step in lane schedule, situate them on that and say, okay, we're going to hold you harmless on this until you meet whatever conditions move you into this model. And if that's triggered by license renewal, the 5-year license renewal period, that's, you could stipulate that, or when you catch up, whatever we say, or a certain number of years that you've got to, if you want to move into a license 4, or higher, you've got to, if you want to move off that salary schedule for whatever reason, that hold harmless, you've got to do the work to qualify you for that higher salary in the current system. You can't advance on the old system, basically, is what we would say, I think. But I think this is a huge problem for this committee to address. Because we are creating a system that you at least right now is going to be unique in the country, and that's going to cause some serious problems for integrating folks from outside of the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll follow that by saying we can't afford not to address this problem, because about a third of our pipeline is from out-of-state teachers. And we will kill the pipeline if we do not have a reasonable solution to this problem.
I agree.
This is Brian. Just to add to the problem, there's the question of, could a teacher come from out of state and immediately take an advanced role? And ideally, yes, because you want to be able to recruit great teachers away from other states and put them into roles where they can have a big impact. Dan can speak to his amazing success doing this in Charlotte for a number of years. But that creates the question of, how would you qualify someone for an advanced role? And I don't know if the other committee is thinking about that, but either the state or LEAs would have to decide what would they take from out of state that would qualify someone for an advanced role.
So, Dr. Fleming, I'm going to go back to let's break this down into really specific decisions we're going to make. It sounds, I have to say, Brian's point is absolutely critical. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to solve it right now, Brian, except a formal communication from this subgroup to the licensure subgroup. We've got to find a way to certify out-of-state teachers as being in the advanced categories, and we need to think about that. So with that said, though, I think the initial question is, we know we're going to do a hold harmless, so I think that's a given. Does the hold harmless, is it provided to a teacher as long as the teacher wishes to remain on it, or is there some trigger or some limited time period that moves the teacher off the hold harmless provision onto the new schedule?
And also, to Marcy's question, our responsibility to determine our other subcommittees, I believe that's maybe geared to determining what it would be for an out-of-state. I assume that's geared towards what it would be for a teacher, the steps for a teacher out-of-state to qualify for a license for advanced. Tom, am I correct in assuming that is another subcommittee?
Yes, I think the requirements need to be the requirements, but that subcommittee needs to be on notice that we need to make sure that whatever we're developing, someone from out of state could also provide that. So they can't be too North Carolina specific. So in other words, if I'm saying that EVOS is the only way you can be an advanced teacher, and I'm not saying that's the case, I'm just using that as an example, then we know that's not going to work, because no teacher coming from out of state would have our state's EVOS scores, or it would be limiting to a certain number of states that use the EVOS system. So there would have to be measures within that collection of measures that you're using to demonstrate competencies that would also exist in other states.
Mm-hmm. Which could potentially right now only be assessments required or tested areas required by the feds, right? I mean, that would be about the only common.
Yeah, and
that's a limited number of areas. So
that's right. So I mean, they couldn't. We could not support this as a statewide model if we only used EVOS. But you're right. So, but when they're selecting those measures, they need to think about what are some of the measures that could be not only more broad than what EVOS covers, but also would be consistent from state to state.
Mm-hmm. It could be verifiable.
Indeed.
That concerns me too, because I could be the greatest, or try to sell you on the fact I'm the greatest teacher from out of state that you've ever seen, and we have no way to verify that. All right. So we have 9 minutes left. I don't think we're going to tackle all of this today. Tom, I wonder, and Dr. Evans, I wonder, and going through these 4 bullet points again, dealing with hold harmless, do you think some examples on the staff side at DPI, could examples be created to show, one, why we need hold harmless, but also examples of how to fix certain situations so that we could have a discussion next time? I think this conversation about out-of-state teachers and whatever that measure will be for effectiveness could be one of those examples.
Yeah, we could commit to creating some scenarios for you. I think a critical question here for us to do something is, well, maybe we can do it both ways, but this question of whether somebody can ride out a hold harmless, for the rest of their career. And now, if you look at this, at the compensation model, the vast majority of teachers that would fall under the hold harmless are licensed 4. So, as you think about that, it's really about, probably mid to late year career teachers that are being held harmless. And do you want to let them go ahead and just ride out the system that they did the majority of their career under and, retire? Or do you want to try to incentivize that movement? I think really would help us in kind of modeling this out or creating some scenarios that would help us visualize this.
Yeah, well, and I think too, so if we take the old system, you're at step 20 or higher, in theory, you could ride it out, or 25 and higher, is what you're saying, right? And
right.
Through attrition, those individuals would go off the old scale.
Right.
I think, I don't know of a year to give you.
That's okay. If the group is contemplating allowing somebody just to maintain on the limited licenses, on the old system, we can look at that in terms of what that would look like, and I think importantly, we could model out what that would look like over the course of their career, assuming a certain percent increase, cost of living adjustment, and what that would do to a person who's in the system, a person who switched, and a person who rode out the current system for the rest of their time. What would that look like? And is that the kind of the idea?
That's kind of the idea I had, because when I look at license 3 at 45,000, license 4 at 56, in my mind, that's not many people that will ride out on the old scale.
Right.
I mean, I don't know the numbers. You guys certainly probably do, but so I'm wondering, as tough and difficult as a task that this is, I think we're putting a lot of work into just a handful of people, which we have to do, but we're putting a lot of work into probably not that many people, because license 4 is $56,000.
Right. Yeah.
But I may be wrong in that, but that's just frankly, I don't know how. The state salary schedule doesn't even go, so I don't know. Maybe it's a little easier than I'm thinking, but I don't know. Or maybe it's not, but I just can't believe it would be that many people. I do think our out of state may be the hardest group to hold harmless, if you will.
Yeah. We will work on it.
Okay. And I do want to open it up if anyone has thoughts on that to share with Dr. Tomberlin on examples. Marcy, if you have some examples, gosh, I know you look at this stuff every day. So any examples you have, it's kind of, I scrolled through the list there.
I walked in just as you were saying my name. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Well,
tell me again what you need.
Well, we were just talking about examples of hold harmless. I said, you see this every day. So if Tom does build out some scenarios of examples, if you will, of individuals that would need to be held harmless, or a unique situation, what would some of those be, you think? I don't know if I'm
happy to help, Tom. If you want to just reach out, we can talk through things that we're experiencing here, and I'm glad to help any way I can.
Great. Thanks, Marcy.
Okay. That's good. And I'll talk to our folks here as well. Between our finance and HR, I'm sure they can come up with some things too. So I do appreciate that. Before we close out for today, just as a reminder, our next meeting for the subcommittee will be December 15th at December 15th at 8 a.m. and we will be partnering with the preparation and entry subcommittee. Dr. Evans, Dr. Tomberlin, would you like to share on this kind of co-meeting? I know we discussed it, but in the past,
Sure.
but some of the goals of that.
Sure. So this meeting in December, the 8 to 10 a.m. one is prep and entry and budget and compensation. And then there's a 2 to 4 one with licensure and advancement and development.
That's it.
And the focus of that meeting is around micro-credentials to give the subcommittee members a viewpoint from a vendor perspective to see how that would be managed.
Very good. Thank you. All right, everybody. Well, we look forward to seeing you on December 15th. Dr. Evans, am I missing any other announcements I need to share?
No, I think you're good.
All right. I was looking to see if Co-Chair Graham is on here. Dr. Graham, I still see you. Anything you have to share if you're able to talk?
Nothing from me, Dr. Fleming. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And just a reminder that the December meeting will be the last one until probably February, when all of the PEPSC, when all of these recommendations are brought back to us. The PEPSC members have consolidated the recommendations to bring back to the subcommittees. So thank you, everybody, for that. Thank you, Dr. Graham, and we will see everyone again on December 15th at 8 a.m. And hold on one second. I almost forgot. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Good job.
All right. I think that was a motion. Is there a second? I didn't hear it very well, but is there a second?
Brian, second.
Thank you very much. Motion been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.